let's start, guys. Uh, in the previous session, we discussed a little about how do we architect our applications so that they are scalable. Now, let's move to the next part. The next part is regarding the compute services from AWS. But before actually jumping into the compute services, we need to understand a few basic things before that. So let's start with AWS regions. So basically, what are AWS regions, right? And I've also provided a reference link over here, so you can also review it afterwards. So AWS regions are a cluster of physical locations where one or more data centers are set up and managed by AWS. So if you see on this map, all these blue circles are the data centers of AWS. So basically, AWS has all these individual data center locations, right? So why would somebody have multiple AWS regions? So the reason is that uh, it gives AWS the power to go global, right? So it is because of their multiple servers that they are global. Why? Because if they were having only one server, it might have failed in past. So when their server failed, so every service, every client would have faced uh, shutdown of services. But they have multiple servers, so that's why they are globally leading right now. For the clients, I mean to say the customers, the benefit of having multiple regions is that you can distribute your applications globally, right? For to take example of Netflix or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, all these all these big players. So they don't have just one server. We all know like they have distributed their application across the globe into multiple data centers. So AWS regions also provide us the same facility. Like they provide us with all these regions and we can choose where to put our application, and we can choose multiple regions to host our application. So one application can be hosted in multiple regions. Okay, so yeah, um, having multiple regions benefit the customers to distribute their applications globally across multiple regions to ensure highly available apps. What do we mean by highly available apps? Highly available apps means like the application is being divided into multiple servers. So if even if some servers failed, the application in the whole will not fail because it is being replicated into multiple servers. So your application is available every time available for your customers. So that is highly available applications. And having multiple regions protect the application from globally going down when some regions have failed. That's exactly the same point discussed before. So there is also one more thing which is called AWS availability zones. But before that, AWS regions. Let me show you what AWS regions are. So if you go into this link that I provided, you will find that okay, AWS has 24 launched regions. So there is a map over here. So all of these things are the blue part are the regions, and to see them practically, we can go to the management console of AWS. So whenever we are in the management console, here are all the services which we know, and over here this thing, if you click this up, so you will see a list of locations. So this list of locations is actually the AWS region. So there are like all of these regions, and in India also we have one region which is in Mumbai, right? So if you see here, you will see this Mumbai region. So this Mumbai region is that one. So that's about the regions. Now a region itself is divided into smaller components. These smaller components are called availability zones. So basically one region will contain one or multiple availability zones. So availability zones are the actual data centers of AWS. So region is a geographical location where they decide to put their server. So suppose if AWS decides, okay, I'll have a region in Delhi. So Delhi is the region, but now deciding where exactly in Delhi. So let's say AWS decides to launch 3 availability zones in the Delhi region. So 3 data centers will be created, and those will be called AWS availability zones. Okay, each AWS region has a minimum of 1 availability zone. That is the minimum requirement thing, and the maximum is like I have seen like 6 are available in one region. So each availability zone is physically isolated from other availability zones. So all of these availability zones are physically in different locations. That is, if one availability zone fails, might be due to power outages, security breaches, somebody hacked it, or any other reason, it won't affect the other availability zone. So even if one availability zone goes down, the whole region is still not going down. It's still working unless and until all the availability zones have gone down for that region. Each availability zone has independent geographical location. I mean, they are physically stored in different places. They will be all in Delhi for the example, but yeah, in Delhi also they will be distributed in different locations. They all have independent power system. They have their own cooling system, because these wide this large data centers also requires cooling capacity. So they have their own cooling capacity, and even the security systems are different in different availability zones. And every availability zone is connected with every other availability zone inside that region. This allows, like, wherever, suppose if you decide to put your application in region number 2, so you don't need to worry about how my application will be affecting if I put my application in zone 2 or zone 3, because zone 2 and zone 3, and in fact all the zones inside a region, are connected to each other. How they are connected? I mean, the connection between them is high bandwidth. High bandwidth meaning they can transfer data in large, very, very large amounts. So they are not limited by the transfer of data, and their connections are uh, using fiber cables, and these connections have very, very low latency. So it's very fast to transfer data between availability zones. So we as customers, we don't have to worry about where our application is situated in which availability zone. So they are just uh, all the same, and they are highly uh, connected with a very speedy network. Right? Okay, all the traffic transmitted between different availability zones is encrypted. This is also a good thing about AWS. So the data transfer is also encrypted, and all the availability zones are within 100 kilometers of range from each other. So it's a rule of AWS regions that all the availability zones will be inside 100-kilometer diameter. If you want to read about it, so you can go to this page and just go through this page, and you will find all these details what I have just mentioned. So just an example of how we can visualize regions. So suppose there are 3 regions, like region 1, region 2, and region 3. So all these 3 regions are these ones. Let's say one is here, one is there, and one is there. And inside a region, yeah, we have availability zones. So all availability zones are connected, and all other all of these regions are also connected with each other. So this provides, like, everything is connected to everything in terms of AWS. Okay, so what are the benefits of having multiple AWS regions and its availability zones? So why should we decide that where will you put your application, in which region or in multiple regions? So the first benefit of choosing multiple region is that which region is closer to your customers. Suppose if you are an India based startup or a company, so and you know, like all your traffic will be coming from India. So it's an intelligent decision to put your data, your application in the Mumbai region, not in the US region. Why? Because the latency will be large, because every request and every response will be like transferred using internet. So unnecessary delays will be there. So Amazon provides us with the multiple regions so that we can decide intelligently where exactly to put our application to minimize the network latency. One other benefit of having multiple regions is that if a business is in multiple countries, we can choose to distribute our application and its data in different regions for different countries. A good example of this would be, suppose uh, there is a global OTT service provider like Netflix. So I'm not saying that they do it, but it's a very good example to see. So a global OTT service provider like Netflix will store their Indian movies on Mumbai S3 data center. So S3 is where we store our files. So if Netflix is also operating in India, so maximum traffic will be coming from India only. So it's an intelligent decision to put all the Indian movies, all the Indian content in the Mumbai's S3 region, S3 data center, so that the people of India can access the content with the minimum network latency. So you can divide your application, you can divide your data according to your business needs. What are the benefits of having multiple availability zones? Firstly is the high availability. High availability is achieved by replicating your application into multiple servers. So by replicating and distributing the application servers, our databases, our storage in multiple availability zones, we reduce the risk of total outage if an availability zone is facing problem. So we have just discussed that. So if one zone goes down, that's fine. Your application is already replicated on multiple availability zones, so it will still work for the end customer. And we have to do this. Like I mean, it's not something. The replication process is not something that AWS does itself. This is, we have to make our application like that. Like out of 10 servers, 3 servers are in zone 1, 3 servers are in zone 2, 3 servers are in zone 3. We have to do it intentionally. Otherwise, your all the data will be put in one availability zone, whatever AWS decides. And other is the fault tolerant. If we distribute our servers in multiple zones, uh, yeah, it's basically the same thing. If one zone fails, that's fine. Your application can take the load of it. Then one more important topic to discuss before we jump to the EC2 thing, the compute services of AWS, is about the VPC. So VPC basically is virtual private cloud. Sorry, this is cloud. Yeah. So VPC stands for virtual private cloud. So what is that? It's your own isolated network in an AWS region, and in the bracket I mentioned virtually. By virtually mean, we studied in the first session that uh, there is a huge data center, and in that data center AWS virtualizes your servers, and all those virtual servers are part of only one physical server. So because our servers are virtual, even our network is also virtual. Our cloud network is also virtual. So physically our AWS resources are deployed with resources from other AWS accounts on the same physical servers. But because of VPCs, our resources are logically isolated from other resources of other accounts. So suppose uh, a company like Paytm decides to use Amazon. So technically they do, but they have their own data centers. I know this because I know a person who works on Paytm. So he told me once that they have their own data center. The government has this compliance in India that if you are a payment company, then you need to have your own um, data center. You cannot host your application in like cloud servers. So just imagine if there is this payment related company which is doing many transactions in a second. Uh, on the same machine, you also have hosted your application. So the big company might be thinking like, this AWS is sharing my computer with other users also, so they might feel security problems. So that's why we have the VPC, which is so that AWS tells you it's fine, your application is hosted with other applications also, but you don't have to worry, we provide you with your own private cloud. So even if yeah, even if multiple accounts have their resources on the same physical server, it won't mind because VPC keeps them separate. Just an example. So just imagine like this is your AWS region, and all these boxes are the resources created by different accounts in AWS. So all these are under one physical location, but because of VPC, they are logically isolated. So even if they are on the same physical server, that's fine, they're logically isolated. So the VPC 3 is secure from VPC 2 and VPC 1. Okay, so a VPC's scope is all availability zones inside a region. So a VPC, because one region consists of multiple availability zones, so all the availability zones can be comprised in one VPC. And it is mandatory to use a VPC while you create your resources. So by default, AWS, whenever we create our AWS account, AWS already provides us with one default VPC so that we don't have to create our own, like the default one. But yes, based on your requirement, you can create your own multiple VPCs. That's fine. Right. Okay, so these were some networking basics. There is a hell lot more in this. I'm just touching the the outermost layer of the networking layer, but it was required to jump to the what we are going to do now. One more point to do here is that the compute services from AWS. So the previous two sessions we discussed about billing, we discussed some general topics. Now let's come to the services that we use, uh, where you would actually use AWS for your uh, projects. Right. So one of the highest demanding service is the compute service from AWS. So what is compute basically? So compute services are basically those services that allows us to execute our code. That code might be doing some computations in the backend or inside it. Some examples of compute services is like you create a backend project. So your backend project as a whole is dependent on computations. Sending email, so triggering email from the backend is also a compute activity. Connecting your application to the database, fetching the data from the database, storing data, all these things require computations. Crawling web pages in the backend, this is a computational activity. Handling incoming requests and replying them with the response, appropriate response. Uh, and if your project needs you to calculate the monthly reports, so all these data, you will fetch the data, you will calculate on it, then you will provide the data to the front end. All these things require computations. So these are the computation services, I mean, which requires CPU to execute your code. So in compute, there is a large variety of services which AWS provides. EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Compute. In EC2, AWS gives us our own servers, virtual servers, where we can do whatever we want to do. Then if we are using Docker and containers, so AWS provides us ECS, which is the container service. So you can deploy your application on a container, and this container is being provided by AWS as a service to you. Then there's all these three services are container related, Docker related services. Then there is Elastic Beanstalk. We will touch this part, I mean these two parts, in the next session. So I'll not explain these right now because that's the part of the next session. So right now we will now focus on the EC2, which is the one of the major things people start using AWS for. So to start with, so you can go in your AWS management console. Once you are here, you can search for EC2, and the description says like it is the virtual servers in the cloud. Let's see this. So if I click on the EC2, so you will see a dashboard like this where hell lot of things are there. Like, yeah, there are instances, elastic IPs, key pairs, snapshot, volume, security groups, all those things. So many of this is part of the networking, but we will touch some of these things in this session. So if you want to create your EC2 server, so that EC2 server is called an instance. Right now I don't have any instance running right now. So if you want to see your instances, you can come here and you can click on this thing. And you might be hosting your application into different regions. So wherever your application is hosted, you can choose where to launch your EC2 server. So suppose if I want to launch my EC2 on Mumbai, so I'll choose Mumbai. When I do that, then okay, like my region is now Mumbai. Now I'm going to launch my EC2 server in the Mumbai region. So launching an instance is very easy. There is this orange button over here. And just click on this, launch instances. So whenever we launch an instance, the first step will be to choose the operating system. So by default, Amazon supports a lot of variety of operating systems like Amazon Linux too. So Amazon Linux is something. So Amazon has customized their own version of the Linux. So if you want to use Amazon customized Linux, you can opt for this. You can select this. If you are looking for Red Hat, that's fine. SUSE, Ubuntu, which we do mostly in CrownStack. If you are looking for a Windows server, that's fine. They give you this. Windows servers are there. Ubuntu again, Amazon Linux, all those things. So there is a variety of operating systems that are available. If we are looking for Ubuntu, which we mostly do for our development activity, so you can search for your operating system by just typing it over here and hitting enter. When you do that, it will filter out all the operating systems that are available for Ubuntu. So Ubuntu has like Ubuntu 20, Ubuntu 18, Ubuntu 16, Deep Learning AMI using Ubuntu 18, AMI using Ubuntu 16. So for our use case, for our this thing, suppose we are going to use Ubuntu Server 20. So you can select this, and you can also choose the architecture, like the processor architecture type. If you don't know this, that's fine, but the default one selected is also good to go. So let's opt for 64-bit x86 architecture. So you can select this. Once you select this, step number 2, instance types. So what is basically an instance type? So instance type is basically, so you are going to launch your own server. So when you launch your own server, it's just similar to like you are purchasing your computer. So when you purchase a computer, there are some configuration that you decide, like how much RAM do you want, how much CPU you want, and what kind of hard disk do you want. So hard disk will come under the step number 4. So in this step where we want to choose the instance type, all these instance types are available. So Amazon has named their instance types with something like this, like T2, T2 classes, T2 classes are there, T3 classes, A1, C4, C5. Now you will say, what are these? Right. So just go to the learn more thing over here. So when you come over here, you will see all these classes over here. So what we are looking is T2 right now. So T2 is like general purpose. So all of these categories like Mac, T4G, T3, all these are general purpose CPUs. General purpose meaning like they will use RAM, they will use a hard disk, they will use the CPU processing power. There is no optimized thing. So you might be having some application, suppose you are working on a gaming application where you don't need memories, you don't need uh, let's say the compute more, you need RAM. So for your particular use case, you can choose uh, from these categories as well. So suppose you require processing power, hell lot of processing power, so you can go for compute optimized classes. If you are looking for RAM optimized classes, then these are the classes given by Amazon. All these are, you can study more about it. Then general purpose, we will stick to general purpose right now, and in general purpose we will stick to T2 right now. Why T2? Because the other ones are either very costly or they are very less performant. T2 is a right balance to start with. So whenever you are going to work in your project, you should start with T2, and based on the response you may upgrade or downgrade your application, but you should start with T2. And that's why by default also you will see Amazon has already selected T2.micro, and the good thing is that it is free tier available. So if you remember, so we discussed about the free tier, which is like 12 months free services from AWS. So this kind of a computer is 12 months available for me, so I'll choose this one. What it provides, it will provide me one CPU, one core CPU, and 1 GB of RAM, like here. And it is also telling you what will be the network performance. Like the network performance is not going to be too high, like it is coming low to moderate. If you scroll down a little, you will find like if you want high network performance, like so you would want high network performance if you are working on a system like an e-commerce, or a system where like you need to deliver multimedia files, a lot of multimedia files. So a lot of computer types are available. Like these are the instance types, just to remember them. So these are the computer types, like what you want from Amazon. So we'll select this and go to the next step. The next step is the configure instance details. When you come over here, the first question is that how many servers do you want? So by default one server, but yeah, you can launch multiple servers at a time. Then there are some settings that you don't need to worry about as of now. Let them be default. If you see the network, now you will see the VPC. So that's why we discussed about VPC, because everything that you launch, it has to be under one private cloud. So by default, I didn't created any VPC for myself. So this is the default VPC that Amazon provides me, which is fine. Okay, I'm fine with it. Subnets, okay, no preference. Let's not discuss it right now. It's not unnecessary as of now. So a lot of configuration changes are there, configurations are there, but we don't need to worry about all this. Just let it be. Just come over here and decide how many number of instances do you want, and get to the next step. When you come to the next step, this is the storage. So basically the hard disk, you can say, for your computer. So in the step number 2, we decided the RAM and CPU. Now on step number 4, we are deciding how many hard disks and what space of those hard disks do we want. So for the free tier, we can avail up to 30 GB, and this is highlighted over here, like maximum of 30 GB is available for free tier. So you can opt for SSD, and we will obviously, if we are getting SSD, so we will opt for SSD. But there is also magnetic disks. So magnetic disks, as you might know, like these are slower but cheaper. So if your budget does not allow you to go for SSD, so you cannot choose the magnetic hard disk. But yes, we can go for SSD. And how much size, you can decide. And if you want multiple hard disks attached into your one computer, you can do that. So you can add multiple hard disks and you can customize all of them, and you can select and finalize. Then tags. We are not discussing tags, and these are not very important to discuss, so I'm going to skip this right now. Now the step number 6 is security group. Security group is basically the firewall rules. Firewall rules are like, so if you have a computer, so what kind of HTTP request can go in, and what kind of HTTP response can go out of your computer. So you can configure them over here. So by default, Amazon provides us with one security group. You may choose this one, but this is highly risky. Why? It is allowing all traffic from all the protocols from anywhere, right? So it's kind of a risky to use the default security group. So you can create your own security group as well. So suppose my EC2 security group. Okay, then I can decide what kind of interaction do I want. Like if you have a computer, do you want to do SSH? Do you want to process the HTTP request? POP3 is for mails, for email. So suppose if you are using your EC2 as a mail server, so you may allow email exchanges. So POP3 is for emails. Do you want to allow HTTPS traffic? Then you can select this. Then there are a lot of available options. If you decide to choose your EC2 instance as your database, so you can allow your this EC2 to open port number 3306, which is the default port number for databases. So it will open this port. So for our use case, what we will do is that we will allow SSH because we would want to log in into it using our terminal. And from where? So the port number is 22. From where do you want the SSH connections? So firstly is that you can tell Amazon like some specific IPs that only from these IP allow the SSH, or you can just choose my IP. What it will do, it will fetch out your current IP address from your internet and it will bind your SSH to that. Or I would say anywhere, because I might want to SSH using my home, from my office, and anywhere in between there. So I'll allow SSH from my computer. I want to allow HTTP traffic. So HTTP traffic comes on port number 80. I'll allow it from anywhere. And I also want to allow HTTPS anywhere, from anywhere. Basically, so right now I am configuring my firewall rules. I am opening 3 ports. If you don't do this, so even after you create your instance, you will not be able to connect to it, right? So you need to think about what kind of connections do you want. Once you are done with configuration of this thing, you can finally review what do you want to do. I mean, this is the final summary before launching your server. So it is giving you the operating system details. Fine. What kind of computer, what kind of instance are you opting for? You are opting for T2.micro, which will provide me 1 CPU and 1 GB of RAM. Fine. What kind of ports are open and what kind of traffic is allowed. So I am opening SSH, HTTP and HTTPS. Then if you come to storage, then yes, one hard disk will be attached to it, which is 30 GB of in size. So if you are all good with all these steps, hit the launch button. When you launch this thing, Amazon will tell you to connect to it using a key pair. Now coming to key pairs, what are key pairs? So key pair is something that you will use in your terminal to connect to your EC2 instance, right? Because this server which we are creating, it does not have any GUI. It's not like our normal computers. It is only accessible using the command line. So if you want to connect to it using the command line, you need to be authenticated before that. So how Amazon authenticates us? It's using a key pair. So basically, what is a key pair? You can open SSH protocol. So there is basically a protocol to connect to any server using SSH. So that is called Open SSH protocol. So right now what we see over here, the key pair, this also follows this protocol. So you can learn more about it by going into Google and searching for it. But OpenSSH protocols requires us to download a file. What this file contains, this is our private part, the private component of our SSH details. So right now I don't have any key pair, I don't have. So what I can do is to create a new key pair. You need to give it a name like first key pair and download it. So basically when we do this, it will it's saying something. Let's read this out. You have to download the private key file, the PEM file, which will be there when I hit this button, before you can continue. Store it in a secure and accessible location. You will not be able to download the file again after it is created. So because of security concern, it will only allow me to download my key pair file. So care of this file. Keep it somewhere that you know it will be securely, but don't put it in public also, like not on your GitHub repo, but place it somewhere like in your inside your email or your drive, like Google Drive or any cloud that you use. Now I'm going to download my key pair file. When I do that, okay, it's fine, it's downloaded. If you try to open this thing, you will find something encrypted over here, which is fine. So Amazon or any server which follows the OpenSSH protocol, it knows how to read this file. So we are good with it. Now we have created our key pair file so that we can connect to our server using the terminal. Now finally launching my instance. When we do this, it is showing me some status over here, which is fine. I can just ignore this thing and go to the view instances. Now you will see when you come to the instance parts, you will see one server is there, one instance is there, and it's pending. Why pending? Because it's being created. It takes time. Okay, now it has been created. The status changed to running. Now Amazon has created my virtual computer. And there are a lot of details which you can see over here, but these are not very important as of now. Just a few things we would want to know, which is like the public, the IP address of this server. So if you see this thing, this is the IP address of my server. So you can store it somewhere, but it will not allow me connect. You know why? Why am I not being able to connect to my server? But when I was creating my server, I allowed HTTP traffic. So this is HTTP traffic. But why still this is showing me this error? Anybody can answer that? I think no. Sorry? No, port number is by default 80. So when we do the HTTP traffic, the default port number is 80 by default. Yes, because we have not installed any web server. So what web server? Like Apache or Nginx, or for Node.js you have PM2 and you have Node servers also. Basically we have not installed any of these or similar web servers in our computer. So that's why even my computer is up, but it does not know how to respond. Why? Because my server application is not there right now. Okay, but yes, your server is now living, it's there, and the IP address of your server is this one. Okay, and there are a lot of details that you can see over here. Like if you just tick this up, you will see a lot of details coming on from the bottom side. So you can drag this up to see the details. So Amazon gives it an instance ID, which is fine. You don't need to worry about this. This is your public IP, and this is the same IP which we saw here. This is our IP. This is our DNS. I'll show why we need this in a couple of minutes. then what kind of computer, what kind of instance it is T2.micro. Elastic IP we'll just discuss in some minutes. What VPC it is connected to, this is the VPC. Subnet, which subnet, it's fine over here. Then what platform, Ubuntu, right? Okay, and a lot of details you will find over here. And there are a lot of tabs also. If you go to the security tab, so it will tell you what kind of traffic are we allowing right now, and you can modify all these things. If you want to modify this after you have created it, you come to security tab and click your security group. So if you remember, security group is our firewall that we created for this instance. If you want to modify this, just click from here, or you can just scroll down over here also, and you will find security groups from here also if you have multiple security groups. So all your security groups will be here. So this is the default one that Amazon gives us, and this is the one that we created. And if you just tick this up, again you can see a lot of details over here. So what are the inbound rules? Inbound rules meaning what can enter into my server. So all these things can enter into my server. And what are the outbound rules? How my server can throw output is this. My server can reply on any port to anyone. This is also risky, but I cannot we are not discussing the outbound rules right now. But okay, if you need to modify this, just tick over here, go to action and edit. So you can again come over here and add more rules or delete some rules if you want to, and just save. So whenever you save them, automatically all the EC2 instances that are tagged to this security group, they will automatically inherit all those firewall rules. So one security group can be inherited into multiple instances. Okay. Then coming to the networking side. These are a bunch of details. We don't need any like most of these details, only the DNS and the IP address. We'll come to it sometime. Then coming to the storage, it's telling me what kind of hard disk and how many hard disks do I have. So again, all those details that we knew. Then status checks. So what are status checks? So basically Amazon has this intelligence. After every few minutes, Amazon internally pings our server. Amazon continuously checks the status of our EC2 server. So if your EC2 server has some kind of a problem, the security check will fail. And if the security check fails, that will be highlighted over here. Like there will be a warning sign over here, like your EC2 server is not performing well. And using some other AWS services like CloudWatch, you can trigger to send you an email whenever the status check fails. Okay, but the status checks are something which Amazon does internally. It repeatedly will check the health of your server. Then comes the monitoring part. In the monitoring, you will see a couple of graphs. I'll show. Like what is how much, what is the CPU utilization? Was there any status check failed? If yes, then how much? Like how many count? Then coming to the networking. So like this is the how to say this, like the bandwidth. How much traffic is coming into your server? How much traffic is going out? How much packets you are transferring in bytes? Okay, and there are a lot of graphs over here. This helps you to monitor the health of your server. Like if your CPU utilization is going as high as let's say 80%, 90%, so you might be able to relate with your local computer, like which we all use at our home. If the CPU utilization is going high, that means something is going wrong. So similar to this, you can monitor your server like this. This is the free monitoring available. There is a very good monitoring tool available from AWS, but that is chargeable, which is again CloudWatch. CloudWatch is dedicated service from Amazon that you can say integrates into your EC2 server, and it will continuously monitor it. And if anything goes bad, you can decide, like you can tell CloudWatch your rules, and if your rule hits. Like if you suppose if you have a rule like tell me if CPU utilization goes beyond 60%, so it will automatically trigger you an email. But that's a paid service, CloudWatch. But the for free, Amazon will allow you these graphs, so you can check the health of these servers. Just as a demo part, like I'll show, because right now our EC2 does not have any graph, but we can uh, see from one of my clients, Amazon login. So I'm going to log in into my client's account. This is our client's account, and if we just go to EC2, either from here or from searching from the service, that's fine. Then we go over here, and you will see 3 servers are running right now. You click here. These are the 3 servers that we are running for PartRunner. So this is the production server that wherever we have hosted our application. If we come to the monitoring part over here, it takes a little time to load this page. So don't worry if it is not coming up instantly. Yeah, so this is the CPU utilization. Like on average, we are hitting only 10% of CPU utilization, which is good. It's good. This tells you like, do you want to scale up this server? Like, do you want to opt in for T2.macro or some other computer instance type or not? Like this is the network in bytes. So uh, for this particular timestamp, we transferred 36 MB of data from our server. This server only, and yeah, this is fine. So that's how it checks, and these are the security checks. So again, like all the security checks are good, and meaning the server is running fine. If you come over here, okay, that's fine. Okay, now let's restart the server. I'll restart the server, and I would want you to notice the IP address. Right now the IP address is this. I'm going to copy this thing here. This is our IP address, and this is our public IPv4 DNS. Now suppose I'm going to restart my server. So to restart your server, just tick over here, actions, instance state, reboot. So I'm going to reboot this server. Okay, seems like the server is rebooted now. And if you temporarily want to stop your server, you can. So this is the reboot, and there is also a stop. So you don't want to delete your instance, but you just want to stop it temporarily. So you can hit this thing, and terminate is if you want to delete your server. So if you go to the stop instance, so it will stop now. I'll show you why I'm doing this right now, why I did this thing. Just a minute. Let it stop. Just to mention, all the key pair files are listed over here. So we created one key pair file, so it is registered over here. If you want to create a new key pair file, you can just go through this simple wizard where you have to enter the name of the key pair file and hit. this button. When you do this, automatically the PEM file will download. Okay, coming to instances again, it is stopping. It takes time to stop, so it's stopping. So till it stops, let's discuss a few more things, which is yeah, okay, now it is stopped. Now it is stopped. If you come over here and refresh this once, and you will see the IP address is gone now. Why? Because we deleted our because we stopped our server. So your computer is now shut down. Because it's shut down, your IP address does not exist. Even your DNS is now does not existing. You will say you have this IP address, right? But this is private IP address. Private IP address is related to your VPC. I'll not go too much into this detail, but this is related to CIDR protocol. If you want to learn more about it, oh sorry, this is not. It's coming to something like drug CIDR, uh, internet, classless internet domain routing. So this private IP that you see over here is because of CIDR, and if you want, so you can learn more about it. But one thing is sure, if you copy this thing and paste it over here, it won't work, because this is the private IP address. This is something similar to how our Wi-Fi operates. So I'm going to log in into my home Wi-Fi. If you see, 4 devices are attached. So this is the private IP address. So my Wi-Fi has 4 devices attached: my TV, phone, and this laptop. So this is my private IP addresses. So this is my local, something running from internally from my Wi-Fi. So similar to your VPC, this IP address is your private IP address. This cannot be accessed using the web browser or using the public internet. Okay, so it will just stay here for a minute, and then Chrome will throw an error that cannot connect to it. Now let's start our server again. So just take this up, instance state, and start. Now it is going to start the server again. Now you see, again the public IPv4 is allocated and public IPv4 DNS is allocated. Surprising thing is that this is different from what you had earlier. Right? All these things are now different. Like this IP is not matching this one, and even this thing, the public DNS is not matching this one. So I'll tell you why. What happens is that we all know, like, the IP addresses are limited on the internet. So what happens is that because the IP addresses are limited, if we stop our instance, the IP address that Amazon provided us will be gone. Like it by that time, Amazon has allocated that IP address to some other EC2 or some other uh, thing that can be tagged to an IP address. So whenever you stop and start your EC2 server, you will see your IP address will change. Now this is problematic, because if your IP address will change so frequently, whenever you stop and start your instance again, so this poses a problem. Why? Because in your code, or suppose in your DNS, like in where you have the A records, so whenever you provide a record, so you provide the IP address. So this IP address will be changing again and again. So you will again have to go to your DNS and again have to update your A records again and again. That is a problem. So to solve that problem, Amazon provides us with a very good solution, which is elastic IPs. What are elastic IPs? IP is just IP as you know it. Like IP is what we know, IP. What do we mean by elastic? Elastic is that it's flexible. What do we mean by flexible? Flexible, the first thing elastic IP gives us is that once allocated, it will be my private property till the time I release it back, right? So this is basically the static IP that you can get from Amazon, and once you have your static IP, you can give your instance this static IP, so that whenever you have to reboot your instance, whenever you have to stop and start your instance again and again, the IP address will not change. And this is good thing because your code depends on your IP address, right? A lot of things depends on the IP address of the server. If you have your proxy servers, so even the proxy servers wants to know your IP address. So all these things should remain stable. So to keep it stable, highly required to, whenever you launch an instance, also get an elastic IP from Amazon. How you can get the elastic IP? Just hit this orange button over here. It will tell Amazon to provide me my static IP. When you click this button, it will ask you a very simple questions. Let it be like here, like we want to fetch the IP address from Amazon pool of IPv4 addresses, then allocate. So now you will see in my elastic IP thing, you will see one IP has been allocated to me. Now this is static IP, and this will remain with me until I release it. When I release it, it again goes back to Amazon, and Amazon can allocate this IP to some other AWS account. But till I release this, this is mine. This is mine. So what we want to do is to give my this instance the elastic IP, so that the IP address should not change with every restart. So how we do it is, firstly, before that, I would recommend that you should also give your servers your name, like some human friendly name that you can relate to, like my first EC2 server. Okay, so this is a friendly name for you to remember it, because you cannot remember this thing. And if you have 10-15 servers, then obviously we cannot remember this thing. So give it a friendly name. Then when you have your friendly name to it, come to elastic IP. Over here, if your elastic IP is associated with some server, so this column associated instance ID will be filled up. If this is blank, so that means that this IP is with you and it is free. I mean, free mean it is not tagged to anything right now. So we want to take this up, go to actions and associate elastic IP address. When I click this thing, so it will ask me where to assign this elastic IP. You have this IP, where to assign it. So right now we want to assign it with our instance. So we will select instance and then click over here. When you click this thing, it will load all your EC2 instances and the human friendly name over here. So the friendly name that we have given is this. So I'll choose this thing and just associate it. Now you will see in your elastic IPs, it is being tagged to something. Now this is filled up. If I go to my instances now and I select this thing, I'll refresh it once. If I select this, now if I check my IP address, so this is my public IP address, and this is the exactly same of what this IP address is. These are the two same things. So now my instance has got a static IP, so that anytime I stop and start my instance, it's fine. My IP will not face this kind of situation now, which we have. So now our public IP address is this one and public DNS is this one. You can work with either of these. Either you can directly know your IP address or you can know your public DNS. Now comes to the interesting part. Let's connect to our EC2 instance using SSH. Till here, before starting that, any doubts or any questions or anything you want to clear right now from anyone? Okay, it's fine, right? Okay, then okay. Let's come to the next part, which is to log in. Like I want to SSH into my server. So to SSH, what we need is the PEM file. My PEM file is stored on my desktop. So this is my PEM file. This is my PEM file. Now the command to connect to your EC2 server is fairly simple. You can tick this up and hit the connect button. When you connect this thing, you will see SSH client. If you click on this thing, you will see the a dedicated SSH command for your EC2 server that you want to work with. So you just copy this thing, paste it over here. So this is your pre-generated SSH command for your server. If you hit enter now, it will ask for the first time only that do you want to recognize this server as a known host. So yeah, we will select yes. Now when you hit yes, you will see a warning is there. It won't allow you to connect. Why? Because it's giving you a warning. It is saying your private key file. What is my private key file? This is my private key file, what we downloaded. It's unprotected. Amazon is saying it's unprotected. By that, what it means, it wants us to change the permission of this file to 400. Okay, so this is one requirement from Amazon, that change the file permissions of this file to 400. If I try to now connect again, now you will see I am logged in into my server. So this is our server that we have. Whenever you log in into your server, it will show you some normal details like you have 30 GB of hard disk, memory usage, the RAM usage is 18%, and what is the system load? It's 0 because we are not doing anything right now. Okay, now what I want to do right now, if you remember this thing, when I copied my public IP and I tried to hit it, it refused the connection. Why? Because my server do not have any web like a server application like Apache or Nginx or any other similar thing. So let's add that. So I'll go for sudo apt update first. Sorry, sudo apt update to update all the repositories. We all know this. And if you work with Python, just input from my side, Ubuntu comes with Python pre-installed, Python 3. So if you are working with Python based applications, so you don't need to install Python over here. But excluding Python, if you are working with Node.js, so you need to install your Node, you need to install npm, and you need to install everything that you want to work with. It is a fresh thing. I mean, it does not have much, but it provides you with two things. Firstly, Python. Okay. Oh, sorry. So it's pre-installed Python 3.8.5, which is the latest version right now. And it also comes pre-installed with Git. So you don't need to install Git because it's a very common practice to use Git on servers. So it is a pre-installed software for you. So you don't need to do it. Now I'm going to install a web server so that my server can connect using port number 80. So to do that, I'm going to install Nginx, which is a web server. Now I'm installing something which has the capability to listen to port number 80 and to respond back on port number 80 based on the request what I'm giving right now. Okay, now my Nginx is installed. If I refresh this thing, you will see welcome to Nginx. So now Nginx has been installed on this server, and this computer, our instance, can now listen to HTTP traffic and even HTTPS traffic also, because Nginx supports both HTTP and HTTPS. So this is one plain thing where Nginx starts from. The root directory of Nginx is var www.html. So what this page that we are seeing over here, it is coming from var www.html, and this is the page that we are seeing right now. If you want to create your own file, so now you can do it. Okay, and if you do varun.html, you will see this is serving. So my web server can now serve HTML files. So it's basically, now it has become a server. Now based on your tech stack, you need to install all the required things that you want to install. For my use case, so what I have done is I have created a bash script. Because I basically work on LAMP stack like Linux, Nginx, PHP and MySQL. So installing all these things one by one was lengthy thing. So what I did, I created a bash command for myself on my gist.github.com, where this is the one. So I've created my bash command. So you can also create something similar to this, where if you are working on Node or Angular or anything, so you can create a shell script command, and once you have your EC2 server with you, you can execute this shell script on your server. How to do it? Just I'll show one example how I do it. So this is the file URL that I have. So I've mentioned it in my instructions. So there is curl command. So curl is used to do HTTP requests. So what it's going to do on my EC2 server, I am going to download this shell script. This is my shell script, and I'm going to download this file, and I'm going to store this file as this file, like lem installer.sh. When I hit this, it downloaded this file, and if you see here, you will see, okay, this shell script is here now. Then there is third step, which is to give this shell script execute permissions. So I'm going to give execute permissions, and now I can just run this bash command. When I do this, it will automatically configure everything for me. So this is a smart thing. I would suggest you should also do it. So whatever your tech stack is, you can install all the dependencies all at once using your shell script, or if you know how to use Docker, so you can get started even quickly with the Docker. So it installed Nginx for me, but I already had installed Nginx, so it's fine. It didn't install anything. Now for database I use MySQL, so it is installing MySQL for me. And okay, I'll select yes, okay, install MySQL for me. So it will install this. So now I'm creating my instance for my development. So it will install. So the idea of showing you this was to have these kind of smart scripts for yourself or for your team, so that you get a fresh EC2 instance and you can customize it according to yourself. Okay, so it will install everything what I wanted to do, and it's working as a web server also. Any doubts still here right now? Anything? No. Okay, right. Okay. So okay, this will work. It's fine. It will continue executing everything whatever I want to do. Now, what's more about EC2? So this is your own personal computer on the cloud. You do whatever you want to do with it, just like you configure your own local like your personal laptop for your development. You can do similar things over here. A few things I would want to highlight is, suppose like you are running some instance, and suppose like the instance type is not good, like suppose the application need is very high, so you need a bigger processor. So you can upgrade your EC2 server also, like you can change the instance type. To do this, firstly you need to stop your server. So firstly you need to stop your server. Once you stop your server, you can change the instance type. I'll show you how to uh, change the instance type. So I'm going to stop, and you will see when I stop this server, automatically my SSH will also stop. So I'm automatically logged off from the SSH. So it's stopping. Okay, let it stop. Yeah, it is stopping. Once you do this, tick this up, then do action, go to action, like, and instance settings. It's okay. Let it stop first, because you will see change instance type. Now it is there. Now it is available. So you can come here, change instance type, and you can tell it like which instance type do you want. So you can upgrade or downgrade your EC2 server. Once you do it, if you choose something, you choose it, then apply. When you apply this thing, automatically your server, your virtual computer has been upgraded, and once you are done, just start it again. So using this, you can upgrade or down EC2. And now the good thing is that now you will see, because I have started and stopped my server, my IP will not change. The IP is still the same, which is the Elastic IP coming from the Amazon pool. Okay guys, so okay, I can, once my instance has started, I can again log in into it. Okay, so this is about this session. If we don't have any doubts, so that's all from my side right now. Yeah. Yes, आप क्या कर सकते हैं कि suppose it's in your hand basically. So if you remember, so we discussed about like different architectures. So what we can do is to have only one EC2 server, over where we also install the database, we also install our backend, front end, and everything. That's also possible. Other thing which is possible is that what you can also do is to create another instance where you will only install your database, and whenever you are creating your application, you can give it in your connection string. Like so whenever in your application you're giving the connection string, you can give the IP address of your database EC2 server. When you do that, so your first EC2 server, which suppose it has your backend code, it can connect to the second EC2 server, and in that second EC2 server, do mind that you need to enable the port number for 3306 under the security groups. If you do that, then yes, you can create two EC2 servers and connect them. One EC2 server has your backend code and the other has your database. You can do that. But the good way to do it will be to go for RDS. It's very good to go for RDS. But yes, if cost does not allow that, then yes, you can create your EC2, separate EC2. Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other thing? Okay. So thanks guys. Okay. I'll see you in the next session then.